Nocera, congressional reporter for BuzzFeed, and John Nichols, Washington correspondent for The Nation. Thanks to you both for joining me.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
So, Kate, I want to start with you, because one of the things I think that's interesting about how this vote is going to go down in the Senate is when you look at the GOP senators who are facing primaries in 2014, particularly the Tea Party challengers, they seem to be not in favor, and they made a point of coming out early and often to express their displeasure.
Right, exactly. And so what these Tea Party challengers are doing are pushing these senators who might otherwise agree for a bipartisan compromise to the right. I still think it will pass, and I actually even think some of those senators might vote for cloture, which is a way to get the bill in a place where a simple a simple majority could get the budget passed.
Although, you know, John, what this bodes in terms of the future is we will likely see a lot of this while these guys are in this primary situation where they might normally have either voted for something or been willing to make a deal on something. They'll instead sort of be naysayers, if you will.
Sure. This is really a throwaway vote in many senses. And I'll tell you why. This deal is going to pass. It looks like they've got enough Republicans to get cloture once they're there. I think they might even get to 60 votes. It's possible. But wherever they get, this will pass, and everybody will go home for Christmas. Hopefully they won't enjoy it too much because they've left a lot of people in a lurch there. But the important thing to understand is so much is going to happen between now and the time that those primaries come, that even some people who vote for this thing will have a lot of history between now and then. And in particular, I think that Ryan summed it up. We have a very real chance of a debt ceiling fight that will bring us close to or even, you know, into some sort of shutdown situation. So the notion that this is settled a lot is sort of the wonderful nonsense of the holiday season.
Absolutely. Well, and to that point, Katie, one of the things I thought was interesting this morning was that sound that we just played of Congressman Paul Ryan making it clear. I mean, there's been so much about how this means there's not going to be a government shutdown. That's why we're doing this. But guess what? He made it very clear this morning that, hey, we are still going to hold ransom. We still got a hostage that we can use. I mean, we could be finding ourselves as early as February, could be a little bit later, maybe March or so, or even a little later than that, that we are right back where we were before, fighting over the debt limit.
I mean, the whole point of the budget was to make room to fight over other things, right? They didn't want to have a shutdown, but, you know, saying that we can keep the government open, we can keep the government funded. Republicans want to talk about the Affordable Care Act. You know, Democrats want to be able to fight over immigration reform, and you can't do that when all you're doing is fighting over these very short-term funding measures. The debt limit will be really interesting to see where Republicans actually want to take that and how far they want to take that and how much they think they can extract.
You know, John, the other piece in this that we've been talking a lot on this network and I've been talking a lot about is unemployment insurance and this, you know, issue of leaving town essentially with 1.3 million people who will lose their unemployment insurance just 3 days after Christmas. A, that's bad for the economy because that means that's money that's not going into the economy. But B, you know, just from a moral standpoint, particularly in what is supposed to be the season of peace and goodwill, that to me is the real war on Christmas.
Well, I have to tell you that I suspect there are some members of Congress who may be visited by 3 ghosts around Christmas Eve. Because if you go back and read your Dickens, it's pretty blunt on caring for the poor at this time of year. And frankly, people who are long-term unemployed, they're in an interesting situation. They are not necessarily the poorest of the poor.
Right.
They are people who are still struggling to keep above that line, to try and make it back. But they live in parts of this country where job growth has at times been very, very slow, even anemic. And so giving these long-term unemployment benefits to these folks, it doesn't keep them from looking for a job.
Of course.
That's a silly concept.
Right.
What it does is it allows 1.3 million people and their families to stay And I find this a really deeply troubling part of the whole deal, in addition to the fact that this deal also asks for more money from government workers
Yes.
and from military personnel for their benefits, that's taking even more money off Main Street. So I don't see this as any kind of stimulative process.
You know, I agree with that. And Kate, I suspect that there will be more of a backlash, I think, on this issue about pensions. But certainly I want to stay on unemployment insurance for just a moment, because what strikes me is that the language that is being used is similar to the language when we hear them talking about programs like Medicare and Medicaid, and this idea of makers and takers, and, you know, who's deserving and who's not deserving. I mean, it's really becoming a class warfare when they are just really ignoring the reality of why we have long-term unemployment in this country and what we need to be doing about it.
I mean, it sets things up for the Democrats, actually, in a way, to be able to fight this battle. You know, they can go back to the arguments over Medicare and Medicaid, and they can say, look now, look at what is happening with unemployment insurance. I mean, this is actually a very good argument for Democrats to be making at the end of this month.
And, you know, John, to your point about pensions, I mean, it's really disgusting, I think, and I completely agree with you, to ask federal workers to have to put more in, and particularly military personnel. And I was actually hoping they would at least do some kind of a carve-out for people who are serving in combat, for heaven's sakes. I mean, can you imagine if you are serving in the armed forces and you're being told, oh, guess what, you're going to have to put more into your pension? I feel like, you know, they're paying already.
This is an austerity budget deal, and that's important to understand. There are no changes in tax policy for the wealthy.
Right.
They didn't close any loopholes. They didn't ask wealthy folks or major multinational corporations to do anything more. They said to the people who, you know, deliver our services at home and protect us overseas, you have to cover the budget gap. You have to take care of it. That's a lousy calculus. And we should all, maybe, you know, people can be happy or sad about, you know, at least a little bit of negotiation and agreement in Congress. But nobody should be happy that this is the calculus we're beginning to work on.
Right.
Because it's saying that those who work hard have to pay more. Those who enjoy, you know, dividends, you know, get an easy break.
Right. And, you know, Kate, final point to you. I mean, it strikes me that that really is the frame looking ahead to 2014 in terms of when we talk about immigration reform. I suspect we will hear about tax reform again, although, as John just pointed out, I don't think anything substantial is going to happen on that. We're going to be fighting all over again about the semantics of it. You know, we'll be heading towards the midterms. In January, obviously, there's still a lot on the plate, and we will have the State of the Union. So it's going to be a very busy month, but I think the frame is really going to be this sort of makers and takers and who's deserving language.
Well, what I think is going to happen, what I think the budget actually does, is it sets up for people to make their arguments. You know, it sets up in a way that there's not a lot in it that you can actually frame what you would like to see done and see get done, and you're going to see both sides really dig in the coming month.
All right. Well, it will be fun to watch, maybe not, but we shall see. We shall see. Right. All right. Kate Nocera and John Nichols, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.